The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Welcome to a discussion with Michael Romano, an author and a chef, a grand chef, I might add, from Union Square Cafe in New York City. Welcome.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
I'm Pat Lindquist and a food fan, and this is one of my ideas of heaven, to sit down with a chef who knows what he's doing and who's had experiences like you've had. I thought before we did a little sampling today and a little tasting of what you've got in your new cookbook, we might selfishly look at your career and all the excitement that it went into making of a grand chef. His visit to Minnesota brings him here with the new Union Square Cafe cookbook, just breaking in the Twin Cities, the fall of '94, and across the United States, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
But there's a lot of work that goes into making you a famous chef, making a cookbook. About 20 years of cooking, I understand?
Probably around 22 now, yeah.
Now, you're from New York City with the Italian heritage. Did that get you into the kitchen as a kid, or what?
Definitely. There is no getting together of the family without food being a major part of it. It just doesn't happen. So food was always the primary.
Sunday spaghetti dinners with Mama.
Yeah.
And
my grandmother was an excellent cook. She was from near Naples in Italy. My mother was a superb cook, and all the aunts were also, each one had their own specialty, and they were known for one particular dish. So it was a great learning experience.
Authentic.
Yeah.
So about the early 70s, I understand, was your first venture. You were working in a small restaurant as a frozen drink man, and somehow you were pulled into the kitchen. Tell us about that.
That's right. It was, the restaurant's called Serendipity. It's still very active. And they have they're famous for these frozen drinks. They put all these ingredients in a blender, and it comes out to this big bird bath of a dish. And they're
the
delicious.
decos in the drinks of the 70s, right?
Right. So I learned to make those, and then I moved into the kitchen proper, and it was great fun. It was very different from anything I'd ever done.
Now, were you still in school at the time?
I was. I got through 2 years of normal academic college, and decided I was tired of it. And actually the owners of the Serendipity restaurant were very good to me. They introduced me to James Beard.
I understand that.
Yeah,
that must have been awesome. He was still very famous to a young man in the 70s, yes.
Oh yeah, very impressive. And he said, well, okay, here's a couple of options what you can do if you really want to do this as a career, and guided me toward the school, New York City Technical School. And that was a great move, because from there I met wonderful people like Professor Tom Ahrens, who took me under his wing, so to speak, and made it possible in a lot of ways for me to go to Europe and experience the wonderful restaurants that Paris had to offer that I couldn't do on my own.
Well, now you went, this is about 74?
Early 70s, yeah.
And you went to England for school.
Right.
And what school were you there in? What chef school?
It was in the Bournemouth Hotel and Restaurant School. It's on the coast.
And we've heard rumors, that English know nothing about food. So why England instead of Paris first? The language was helpful, or?
Yeah, it was easier with the language, for sure. Well, the school that I attended in New York had an exchange program with them.
So it was a start.
So it was a chance to study abroad. And I have to say, I was smitten with Europe from that point on. I did go to Paris right from there, because I had relatives there. And that was my first taste, and I felt like Moses going to the promised land. It was so wonderful getting into Paris, and
you were at the Hotel Bristol there,
right?
And what was your first job in a Parisian kitchen? I mean, are they yelling and screaming in French, and you're going, ah?
Exactly. That describes it very well. I was sweeping the sawdust on the floors. I was in the cold station. We called it garde-manger, and
which is salads and things.
Salads. Every day we did an assortment of little salads in the dish, the ravier, the little ceramic dishes that we'd put out on the cart. So I had to get those ready every day.
Maybe the butter dishes, even all the lowly little things a beginner might do, but every fine restaurant would need.
Fortunately, though, it was the low season, and so things were slow. So they let me fool around with other things, learning other skills, worked with the butcher a little bit and this and that, and it was a wonderful experience.
Now, how was your French going along at the same time?
I went there with rudimentary French, and I just sort of was like a sponge, absorbing and listening, and I'd sit at the dinner table with all the cooks and not know a word they were saying, but slowly it started to come.
Well, even in Minnesota, we know filet mignon.
Yeah.
We picked up French food words for so many years that it's helpful there. Right. Now, you went back and forth between Paris and New York. You helped open Regine's, and you had now, Michael, is it Goujar?
Michel Gerard.
who became your mentor. And tell us
Exactly.
about some of those years. The
Those
places.
were wonderful years. Hooking up with him, first of all, was great. And so I got an opportunity to go to his restaurant in Paris.
Was that Regine's?
Regine's.
All
He had
right.
contracted with Regine to do the food for her club. And the one in Paris was wonderful. It was very exclusive. But he also had his sort of flagship restaurant in Eugénie-les-Bains, the southwest of France. So I worked with him in Paris, then went back to New York, opened Regine's with him.
And we all remember Regine's opening in New York. That
It
was
was quite
just
something.
exciting, yes. And so you came as an American back to your
Right.
homeland, but you had the expertise and the blessing of the French.
And worked with Gerard and his wonderful chefs like Didier Oudil and Gilbert Hadix. And so I stayed with Gerard for a few years in Regine's, and then he kind of terminated the deal with Regine in New York and took me back with him, actually twice, to Eugénie, once for a summer stint, and then as the saucier, which was a great honor to be
And
the
was this
saucier.
the spa resort? Or is
Right,
this a,
in
okay.
Eugénie. This is the 3-star Michelin restaurant.
Well, did you watch anything in the food categories of health at this point? Was it still the creamy, rich butter sauces, or because it was a spa, was it more less reduction, less cream? What was happening with
Right.
food at that time?
Well, Pat, not only that, but Gerard at that point was the forefront. He was the cutting edge of diet cuisine because he was doing his cuisine minceur.
Okay.
So we would do that.
Which
we
means
had
what
both.
in English for those of us?
Slimming cuisine.
Oh yes, mansur,
Yeah,
my favorite
mansur.
word. Okay.
It's like émincé. But he was really on the cutting edge at that point, and we would do all these recipes that had no fat and using vegetable purees, which was very innovative
Yes.
in those days. In
Controversial
the 70s.
even,
it
wasn't
was.
it, from the professionals?
From a 3-star chef.
Yes.
So we had both going on in the kitchen. One side would be doing the traditional rich, he used to call it cuisine gourmande, and then the cuisine minceur was on the other side of the range, and they were thickening things with cauliflower purees and things like
Oh
that.
my Lord. And what were the customers doing out front? Making a choice?
You did. You came either for the spa cuisine, which meant that you had to kind of strictly stick with that because
Or you couldn't one night spoil yourself and go to
because you wouldn't
gourmand?
get results. He was concerned that you saw the results. So you ate first in the dining room. I remember they sat down first and they
Yes.
were served their food. It was a set menu, and then the regular lunch happened or dinner, and then we did our thing.
And then the people, did they get thinner? That ate the
They did. It
healthy-
works. I mean, it can't help but work.
Go out and run 5 miles.
Right.
That helps too.
And they have the thermal spas there. You know, you go take these baths and stuff like that. It's so
Now,
beautiful.
before we got back to America, there was one other job that fascinated me. You were for 2 years a personal chef for a wealthy Swiss businessman.
Exactly, right, Monsieur Lavanchy. That was it was quite an experience.
You were on the Orient Express. You did something. Tell us about. Was that a party that he hosted?
That came a little later, actually. The Orient Express was the next job with Max Kell in Zurich.
Oh, they moved you around.
Right, but back in working for Mr. Lavanchy, it was fascinating because he was, as I say, he was very wealthy. He had contracted to have Michel Gerard be the chef.
Oh.
You see, and I would go as the day-to-day running the operation. But Mr. Gerard left fairly early in the deal, and I stayed on and became his personal chef. He wanted to do a gastronomic club with a golf course and this kind of thing, and it was quite an experience. It was funny because the only time I got in trouble was if I didn't spend enough money on the food. If it was something like a lowly chicken, I'd have to stuff it with truffles.
I see.
Just to make it worthy of the table. But
We know
it
we
was
hear
fun.
about some of our celebrities having their own personal chefs. You know, Prince supposedly has a lot of unusual food habits and eating at different hours of the night. And of course, we know about Oprah with her healthy chef. What's happening there? And so you are the beck and call, I imagine, different kind of time frames. But
Yes.
it must be quite an honor too to have someone just devoted to what you're cooking. You know. Then the most exotic job, that Orient Express. Can you tell us what that was?
That was great. So then after leaving this fellow, I went to Zurich in Switzerland and worked for Max Kell, who had the restaurant Chez Max. And he was an extremely creative chef. We did these projects. We cooked on the Orient Express for 100 people.
Private party for him.
Right.
His own
He
people.
was setting out to prove that you could do great cuisine,
On
what we call
wheels.
à la minute. Yeah. And the thing about it was, the kitchen was the original stove, so we were loading coal into the stove.
Oh no.
And the handicap of it was the train, I don't know if the train wasn't going fast enough or something, but there was hardly enough light. You couldn't even see, Pat, if the sauce was boiling. So,
Finger in the pot.
right. So there we are, covered with this coal dust and trying to get this. We had enough space to dress 5 plates at a time. So you figure out the mathematics that it took us forever to get this food done.
20 times out.
Right.
Wow.
So they waited a little bit for the food, but it was great food. I mean, we finished the meal with a champagne sabayon that you have to make to order. It was just incredible. It was really splendid, but it was quite a task for us.
Now, what drew you back to New York in '84 or '85?
83, yeah.
'83, La Caravelle? Or something else?
Not immediately. I came back. I I suppose had enough of Europe, and I felt like my roots were calling me.
Most of them have never had enough, but I can see that, yes.
And I wanted to get back to where I came from, I guess, New York City. And so I went back and sort of looked around for what was available, and I wound up with, it was an interesting story because I wound up at a restaurant which is now defunct called Pesca. And it was there that I met Danny Meyer, you see.
Oh, what was Danny doing there?
He was just he had this idea to open a restaurant.
Now tell us who Danny is for our viewers. That's your partner.
Danny's my partner. He's the principal owner of the Union Square Cafe
and founded it himself in about
85.
Okay.
And so he was just trying to get some experience because he was young and very inexperienced and had this idea to open a restaurant. And we became friends. But then I got the call from La Caravelle at that point.
And Caravelle, for those who don't know,
is now, my goodness, probably 30-some-odd-year-old, very venerable French, classic French restaurant in New York City. When I went there, it was about 22 years old or something like that, and I was only the 3rd chef in the restaurant's history, and the first American to have that.
First American-born chef.
Right.
Wow.
So it was quite a job, but it was more in line with my training, what I had been doing, classical
course.
French. So I decided, yeah, that would be a great job, and I stayed there for 4 years, as a matter of fact. And
leaving there was maybe a difficult decision, or was this when you went to the Union Square?
It was time. That's when Danny remembered
"We're
me.
ready."
Yeah, and he had done quite well for himself with his restaurant. His chef was ready to leave, and he called me up, and I thought, well, I don't know, this is very different now. Downtown, it's a different scene. But then it's a funny thing. I had learned to love food through the Italian food that we did at home. I learned to cook food through the French classics. But when Danny gave me that call, it was sort of like my roots calling me again to do that kind of food again, that kind of comfort food for me. And I thought that could be interesting, that could be fun to take that technique and use it with this food that I love so much.
So tell us the philosophy of Union Square Cafe. It's in the area that has now been rejuvenated, kind of a warehouse area. For those of us in Minnesota, we've seen some of our old warehouses become alive again.
Right.
Down where there's publishers and writers, and
Right.
about 19th Street, is it?
16th.
16th off of 5th Avenue?
Right, between 5th and Union Square.
And that side of town is called?
That's the Flatiron District.
By Gramercy Park area
right.
too?
There's Gramercy Park, the Flatiron.
And what do we see there? We see trees and old buildings and this street side cafe. You're right off the street, right on the sidewalk?
We're on a side street. Well, what you see is a lot of rejuvenation. You see Union Square Park, which 10 years ago was dangerous, a lot of drugs, a lot of things like that, which now has rejuvenated. You see children playing there now. They're cleaning it up. They've replanted. And the main thing you see there is the farmers market.
You're right near Green Market,
right near the farmers market,
okay.
which is one of the reasons Danny chose the site.
Is it daily a farmers market?
It's 4 times a week now.
Okay.
And it's the biggest in the city. It's just wonderful. It's, for me, the primary driving force of what we do at the restaurant because it keeps us seasonal. It's like having a garden.
Your philosophy is to use what's fresh when it's fresh,
right.
not fly it in from Mexico or something.
As much
right?
as possible, yeah.
You
sometimes
really
you
like
have
the
to.
seasonal approach.
I think it's a much much saner and much more comfortable approach for me to be eating. It's right now we're in mid-October. I don't really want to be eating asparagus or these kinds of things. I'll
Instead
take
you
what's.
would look for the squash.
I'm looking for the squash. You know, the summer is gone. All those bright colors, those great juicy tastes. And now you sort of move into those burnished colors, the golds and the squashes and things like that.
So color is important with you as well as flavor, and I can, right as you say it, I can see
yeah.
it.
The color, the summer has all those bright greens and reds, but the fall gets into different colors. And
in the winter, when there's no market there, what do you see on the plate in your mind?
then we do have to, you know, expand and go a little bit to California or other markets. But we still use a lot of root vegetables and these kinds of things.
That a Pioneer family might have stored in the cellar, right?
Definitely, definitely.
And we have the cooler that we can take it with. Well, then in planning the book, tell us now how you broke this up. Did you think by season again, or what was your thoughts on the book?
Well, that's an interesting question. We are always thinking by season, but we broke up the book according to the way our menu works.
And why did the book come about? Was there demand to put this on paper? I mean, most restaurants don't want to share recipes.
Yeah, I think that's an old-fashioned concept. We're very happy to share. I mean, someone could have all my recipes. It doesn't mean they're going to create a Union Square cafe. A restaurant is more than the sum of just what its recipes are.
What do you think some of the secrets are that make your restaurant stay separate from just a recipe?
The main thing is a caring attitude. It really is. You need people who obviously are skilled at what they do, both front of the house and back of the house is the terms we use. But and you can teach people that skill. I can teach a cook to be a better cook, and Danny can teach a waiter to be a better waiter. But you can't teach somebody to care, you see. And so in our hiring process and just by the atmosphere that we create, he and I and also our managers, we want people to have the feeling that they're cared for in the restaurant. You know, we'll either know their name or not even superficial things like that, but just that their needs are being met, they're comfortable.
Maybe some eye contact that I'll be with you in a minute? Maybe
Sure,
one of those things?
yeah.
I've seen them whip by you for a half hour and say, gee, do they know I'm sitting at this
It's
table?
an amazing ability.
Well, in fact, life is one of the things you said, the liveliness. I don't know if the camera can pick this up, but at the inside of the book, all these wonderful black and white shots, which is another unusual thing this cookbook will show you. He said every shot in here brings some life to the viewer, even though it's black and white. It's almost like the classic Ansel Adams or some of the famous old shots. And here is the hustle bustle of a very happy restaurant.
Right.
A European look too, perhaps with your influence. The bottles of wine sitting everywhere. The blackboard telling the daily specials. Waiters and waitresses look like they wear little striped cotton comfortable shirts.
Right.
Do they wear the white apron around their waist?
White apron, right, and black trousers.
Fresh flowers, I imagine, on the tables.
Right,
hardwood floors. Pretty sparse, not a lot of clutter, right?
Right, not a lot of clutter, open space, very clean space. Everything's and we work hard to maintain that cleanliness and that sparseness is a good word. But it gives a feeling of just being comfortable. It's the kind of place people can come to. There's a picture of people at the bar.
Yeah, I was going to say, we get to the bar. I don't know if the camera can see the bar shot.
Some of them will come several times a week to have lunch. You know, so it's not a special occasion place where you'll come once every 6 months or something like that.
Now, as we're at the bar, and it is a popular stop-off, bar nuts is one of your favorite recipes. I guess one of the people on the staff here tried it and said, gee, is there enough butter to hold all those spices together? Again, that's something you serve at the bar hot.
That's
and just the little cayenne pepper and a little...
rosemary, brown sugar. And we just heat the nuts and toss them in that mixture.
And then people just ask for more. And of course, there's no calories in that, right?
Yeah.
Are calories not as important to you as flavor and maybe portion control? Do you maybe think people in Minnesota and other parts of America take too big a portion, perhaps? And if they wouldn't, they could still eat their butter and everything?
Yeah, I don't usually get caught up in counting calories. But I'm very aware that people want to watch what they're eating, and that's wise. I think, for me personally, and I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a scientist, but I think if you look at the overall picture rather than how many calories you've got there, what is it you eat in its entirety? What is the content of your meal, and also what do you eat during the meals? That's where we in this country tend to fall down, because there's always something to grab and munch on, and that something usually involves fat, salt, sugar, or something like that. So if you leave that be, eat a good meal, eat a balanced meal, eat a lot of vegetables, cut down on the meat and fish size. You don't need to have a 16-ounce steak. You can have a smaller portion. And then I don't worry so much about that little bit of butter or that little bit of cream or whatever, in moderation.
Well, and you're a wonderful proponent of vegetables, which we'll talk about in a minute. But before I get to vegetables, earlier on in the book, we do get to your famous hot garlic potato chips. And I guess there's nothing to show here. But tell me how those came about by accident almost, they said. It's a fascinating story.
Our cook we used to serve a thick cottage fry with our confit of duck. And a cook had sliced them. It happens all the time. It's so funny that somebody will interpret something a little differently than you told them or expected them to do. And it doesn't always work out as fortunately as this, but they cut them too thin. and cook them up. And so they were these wonderful crispy chips.
Like a potato chip instead
Exactly,
of cottage fries.
exactly.
Okay. But the seasoning on it had already been planned to be a garlic because of the duck and whatever, so
Right.
that wonderful flavor was there. And
Right.
then one of the customers said it was better
These are
than the
great.
duck. Is
These
it?
are great, yeah.
So we keep it?
So that's, I mean, that kind of response is really how this book came about. You asked me that a moment ago, but people kept asking us, well, why don't you do a cookbook? You have all these great recipes. And we thought, the world doesn't need another restaurant cookbook. But eventually they convinced us that, well, maybe it does. And
Well, then you go on in and you show some of your other specialties with, I even see sandwiches, salads. What is a sandwich that comes from your place? Is it something on focaccia? Is it unusual treatment? I mean, that's just, you know, I think of salami and white bread. What is a sandwich for you?
well, a couple of things come to mind. One is you mentioned focaccia. We do a wonderful vegetable sandwich. I'll offer sometimes, there's always a growing number of people who want to have a vegetarian selection, especially at lunch. So the sandwich provides a great place for that. So we'll do a grilled focaccia spread with an oven-dried tomato pesto that we make.
Ooh.
Lay some roast eggplant on it, some escarole, some ricotta cheese, ricotta salata actually, you know, and things like that with some balsamic vinegar and a bean salad. So
And
you've got
then
a
serve it
wonderful,
open, perhaps.
right, open
Okay,
face.
so more like a pretty plate, and you could use your fork or whatever. Huh?
Sure.
And then we wrap with desserts. You have one famous dessert that everybody talks about, and that's the banana tart with
Banana
some
tart.
caramel sauce. We can learn how to make that at home, right?
It's our #1 seller.
Oh, well, I think we're going to step over to the table and see you show us some soups or something today. What did you bring today?
Well, being it's coming into the cooler weather and the Thanksgiving season, I thought the creamless mushroom soup, that answers your question about the
there goes the
fat,
cream,
right?
okay.
So the cream goes right out, and
Be a
because
good
of the
winter soup for Minnesotans, right?
and the flavors that are there are rich enough, so you don't need the cream.
Okay.
And it's quite simple.
Well, let's go see.
Great, let's do that.
Well, here we are at the cooking table, and we're going to get a few tips from Michael Romano from the Union Square Cafe. Soup.
Soup.
Mushroom creamless soup.
This is a great time of year for soup. Creamless. We were
Okay.
talking before about fat in the food, and so there's none in this one. A little bit of olive oil.
Okay.
And great for the colder weather. So
All
we're
right.
just gonna do some nice vegetables in the pot here. Some onion.
Onion adds flavor no matter what, right?
Yeah, you always need a little onion. The exact cut is not that important here because we're going to puree this.
Ah.
You see, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to slip this right in here. I love the sound of that.
Oh, yes.
Then you know you're cooking when you hear that.
Yes. And I can smell your herbs. Now, what do you have here today?
That's thyme, fresh thyme.
Okay.
We're going to put a little leek. I love leeks.
I heard you mentioning to use just part of the leek. Sometimes it's too bitter up too far.
Yeah, you don't want to go too far up into the green. As it turns into that slightly darker green, that's fine, but not the real dark. But don't throw it away because you can use it for if you make stock at home,
Oh, yeah.
things like that. You always want a little carrot, gives sweetness and richness to it. Keep your fingers out of the way so you don't add any meat. We don't want any meat in this dish.
Oh, oh.
And
Every chef has a sense of humor about knives, don't they?
you kind of have to. You kind of have to because they're
I
your
also hear
companions.
only that certain people can use their own knife because you cut at a different angle with different, you
That's
know.
true. That's true, especially with the non-carbon, the softer steel. And your mushrooms, of course, since this is a mushroom soup.
Any kind of mushroom for this, or you like the little buttons?
The little buttons are great. If you wanted to get into a little bit more exotic, your shiitake mushrooms or chanterelles or these kinds of things, they're all available now.
We're
It's
the home
wonderful.
of the morels in Minnesota.
Right.
Yeah.
You have beautiful stuff out here. That's great. And your wild rice, of course.
Yes, wild rice.
That's great. I have actually a soup with that.
Good. In the book? Good. And
Yeah.
this is in the book too, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, we're going
All
to cook
these
that.
secret tips. Looks easy so far.
We want a little thyme in there. I love fresh herbs. Now there's something that, 10 years ago was a little harder to get than it is now, to have fresh herbs all the time. We had
Can you keep some of them in the freezer too? We're learning if it doesn't really hurt them too
certain
much.
ones, like my mother used to keep basil. She'd clean every leaf and lay it out and put it in the freezer. So then when she made her sauce, you could just take a leaf out and put it in. It was great. So now I'm sautéing the vegetables in here. Now, why do you do this? Well, you're concentrating the flavors in those vegetables. You're getting the vegetable water out and concentrating the flavors before you add your
I'd say
stock.
very little liquid at all. Yeah, just the oil.
Right. It's the water is steaming out. See that steam coming out? Okay. So now I'm going to transfer this cooked vegetable to the blender here.
All right.
I've added my liquid. I've added my stock. I'm going to transfer it to the blender. We're going to puree this.
All right.
And then
voila, like magic,
Voila.
we've gone from the blender to
the soup that's been pureed.
ah.
You see, and you get that nice woodsy kind of, has a wonderful aroma.
Now this is where you can add a little sherry if you want.
You certainly could, yeah, a little sherry, or I think a little Madeira
Those
would
cold
be nice.
mornings
Yeah.
or lunchtimes.
Great. So I want to get you a little bowl here.
Okay.
You to taste this. You can hold on to that.
Do you do a soup of the day or a soup of the week?
We actually have two. We always have our black bean soup,
That's your famous
which is
for
a
that.
signature dish, and we serve that actually with a shot of sherry.
Oh, how appropriate. And what
Yeah.
kind of garnish? You know, soups look so plain and people forget.
Right. Well, for that soup, we do a slice of, very thin slice of lemon with parsley.
Oh, that's
and we put the
pretty.
sherry on it. I'll give you a little taste here.
And do
for
you
this
use
one, we
bowls
use
like
chives.
this too? Are you into the pottery bowls? This is
It's not
beautiful.
really our style at the restaurant.
What style would
but
you
I love
use?
them. We have plain white,
This
Yeah.
is very, very pretty. Now, what have you just put on a little chive?
little chive, yeah,
get to
that little
taste?
onion.
And you know what I like? You didn't make it too thin. You didn't put it through a sieve.
No,
There's
I
a
like
little
to keep
bit of
those
texture there.
bits in there, yeah. And you could also put a little olive oil if you wanted.
You mean you might add olive oil afterwards?
I like a little olive oil, especially this is a time to bring out your very best extra virgin olive oil because as you drizzle it on raw on the top of the soup, the heat of the soup brings that wonderful aroma. You can try it.
What does
if
it
you
do?
like.
Does it make a picture too? Can you see anything?
It doesn't really, it does kind of sit on top, but not
Oh,
really.
yes.
Little drops,
A little clear.
you know.
Oh, and you're right. I
But
can
as I
smell
say,
it.
yeah,
Wonderful
brings
tip.
the aroma of the
Wonderful
olive oil
tip.
out.
Well, today we were able to try a little soup, learn a few tips, all because we had the luck of meeting Michael Romano in from the Union Square Cafe and his new cookbook. I'm so excited you came to Minnesota.
My pleasure.
Thank
It's
you.
wonderful
Can
to
we
be
say
here.
bon appetit?
Bon appetit. We sure can.
Thanks very much.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.